must start with your CV. I know it's a boring question, and anyone can go to your LinkedIn and see what you've been up to. But I was really amazed by the length of your experience, all the different projects, and all the different companies that you've worked with over the years. So I just thought, give you the challenge of giving us a top level overview of your career evolution.
Yeah, yeah, I get asked this a lot. And firstly, like, I love LinkedIn, and I always tell everyone, update your LinkedIn. Every job you do, just update it because that you're going to forget. And sometimes that tiny little job that you did for like a few weeks, which you're like, oh, it's just a quick gig, could be the thing that triggers your big gig in a year's time. Right. So that's why I put everything. That's why it's a bit overwhelming when you look at my LinkedIn. It's like, damn, this guy's been busy, but I put everything down because you just never know. And people that work there move on to different places. So I'll give you an overview about my career. I actually started in 97 when I was still at uni. I did a work placement at a company called Davis Studios in video game. I'm talking PlayStation 1 days here, right? So this is like old school gaming. I never was really a good 3D modeler. So I quickly transitioned into what we would call back in the day FMV, full motion video, which is basically the early cinematics you would see in games, the stuff that says not game footage, that sort of thing. And I end up working in places like Codemasters, Kuju Entertainment, worked on a Nintendo game called Battalion Wars, and a bunch of other games. And eventually I've decided I don't want to be making movies in a video game engine. Who does that? And yeah, obviously I do that now, but like back in then, no one does that. So I went to work into visual effects. I didn't go to film school. My parents were like, "Don't go make films. You're crazy." Do computer science, and I that's what essentially what I did, Haley. I did computer science in at uni, and I combined computer science and art. And what do you get? Video games. So from there, I went to video games. Then I went over to work at MPC. And considering Haley, I had worked in the game industry for a long time, well, like good 5, 6 years at the time, I was quite senior level at that point. But when I went to work at visual effects, I had to start my way back down again because back then they didn't have the multifaceted approach to visual effects like you have today. Everything was so compartmentalized. So they're like, "What do you like?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I love photography, but also I can do everything. Give me everything." And they're like, "Well, and this was NPC." Rest in peace, obviously. And NBC were like, "Well, we pick a route and stick with it." So I'm like, "Well, I love photography, and I like the idea of putting everything together to make the final shot." So I became a visual effects compositor. But before I got to compositing, I had to start at the bottom. So I became a roto artist. So I was doing a lot of rotoscoping for like a year or so. Worked on movies like 10,000 BC, Sweeney Todd, did a stint on one of the Harry Potter films and Narnia. And then from there, I quickly went into tracking, then become compositor, then became a senior comp, then rised up to become a VFX supervisor. My biggest I think my biggest breakthrough, like the thing that I always talk about, is doing previs on this movie called The Dark Knight. For me, that became my film school. I learned everything about lenses, cinematography, framing, composition, everything, and how to work very fast and iterate very fast. And that's the world of previs, which I actually fitted in between previs and something called postvis because I was a compositor. So I did that at a company called Envis, a guy called Nick Hatch, who was my boss at the time. Amazing. And then from there, I became VFX Soup, and then I went to a place like Jellyfish, which unfortunately recently had to shut down. But like, I owe a lot to Jellyfish Pictures, because Jellyfish pretty much Phil Dobry specifically gave me my first break as a VFX supervisor. Yeah, it was like, "What do you want to be?" I'm like, "I want to be a VFX supervisor." Okay, well, you can try this out, see how it goes. And I was there for years, so that was amazing. And but while I was a VFX supervisor, I was making short films because like you have time in VFX to make short films. Whatever spare hours I had and all the camaraderie friends I built up in the industry, I got them all together. We made short films, and one of them actually popped. It was a short film called Project Kronos, which is a fake documentary where I just took all this NASA footage, which was public domain, and I just comped a bunch of stuff in there to make this fake documentary about sending a human brain out into space. And we made first contact. And the thing went big. I got signed to an agent manager in Hollywood, and end up developing a bunch of projects of 20th Century Fox, Paramount, and so on. So my career was going like, woo, great. I can leave visual effects. 2 years later, I'm still in visual effects. I'm working at this amazing company called Lex Hag on a show called Poldark, and I'm going to my reps in LA. I'm like, why have I not made a movie yet? Like, I'm still working in visual effects. I'm writing these scripts on spec i.e., they don't pay you, right? Because like you're writing for Fox and Paramount, you should be grateful, that kind of thing, which was amazing. I learned so much. And then eventually I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna make a movie myself. So I had some money saved up for a house. Don't try this at home, kids. But I'm like, make a movie, buy a house. Screw it, let's make a movie. And I made a movie. It's a film called The Beyond, which was the longer version of the short film that did really well. And lo and behold, that film did really well. It came out January 2018, and it was number two in the iTunes charts next to Blade Runner 2049 and Wonder Woman. This is a film with no big name cast, by the way, Haley. This is all concept based, and this is me in my room of a bunch of people. I had like my friends that was cinematographer. We just brought a bunch of people in. Everyone got paid because obviously I believe that everyone should get paid. Some visual effects houses that helped me got deferred, and the film came out 2018, and April, you get your sales report on a quarterly basis. The distribution company at Gravitas Ventures send you a sales report, and they're like, "We delayed your sales report because we had to double check the figures, but you're like, 300% in profit around that." I'm like, "What?" Because yeah, so you've covered your personal budget and you're in profit, which is very, very, very rare to say those words, profit in indie film, even
Yeah.
today, right? Very, very rare. And I think when I think about it now, like when people ask me like, why, how did that happen? I mean, there is an element of luck. I have to say, there's an element of luck, but also a lot of it is timing. A lot of it's timing. If I made this film today, I don't think it would have got that traction. I made that film at a time when movies like Monsters by Gareth Edwards was blowing up. Movies like District 9, it was people's mind. Everyone wanted grounded science fiction, but also there was a time when visual effects artists were making short films and putting them on Vimeo, getting Vimeo staff pick and getting signed. And I was within that circle of these filmmakers. So it was all about the timing. 9 months go by, Netflix reached out and said, "Hey, what's this movie The Beyond that we keep seeing everywhere? Like, we want to license it for 1 year." And they do this deal, Haley, which they don't do at all today, which is here's X amount of money for 12 months, non-exclusive. I repeat, non-exclusive. And it's America, Canada, UK, and South Africa, Australia, and some parts of Europe. So even though the film was everywhere, it was on Netflix as well. So that obviously kudos was massive on that. And then I set up a production company with my former business partner Paula Crickard, who worked at New Buena Studios and Millennium. And for about 8 years, we ran that. We've done various projects. I did another film called Origin Unknown with the lovely Katie Sackhoff, who's in Mandalorian. But also at the same time, as a freelance director, I was hired by Disney to direct their show Fast Lane. And this is funny, Haley, because like I'd never directed TV before. I've worked in television as a VFX suit, but never directed. I remember when they told me like you're directing the pilot. I'm like, cool. I didn't really understand how
Wow.
important a pilot is. A pilot sets up the entire show. And if it does well, you become an executive producer on the show. So I became an EP on the show for a Disney show, which is mind blowing. I was in Vancouver for 6 months. And it was amazing. And from there, they gave me another project while I was in post production. Like, hey, since you're in Vancouver, there's a thing called the Descendants. I think you're familiar with Descendants, but it's like this kid show. I didn't know. I thought it was a George Clooney film. So I'm
Oh,
like,
actually, that's what I was thinking.
yeah, see, there you go. That's what I thought too. Until they sent me the screeners, I'm like, this is a kids show about it's kind of like the evil Snow White and their kids, and it was a musical with Dove Cameron, who's amazing. And they wanted to create something a little bit dark, and I came in and did the Bridge movie, which is on Disney Plus. You can watch called Descendants Under the Sea. So and then from there, I learned so much about filmmaking, Haley. Like one thing I could say is that every project is different. And then when the pandemic hit, all my live action projects were put on hold. And I'm like, I still need to make stuff. I can't sit around. Like all my other friends, my director friends are like, just wait, man, just wait, just take a break. I'm like, no, I need to make stuff. So I was playing with Unreal Engine and I was using Unreal already to do previs. But what was fascinating about Unreal at the time, this was 2019, was this is like Unreal 4.13 or something. Nothing like Unreal 5 we have today. And people were looking at it, like especially executives in LA and studio executives. They're like, "What is this you're showing?" And I'm like, "No, this is previs." They're like, "No, we've seen previs. Previs is grey and blocky, unless you're like the third floor or Proof or or Halon who do amazing previs. Like people doing previs at home is usually very blocky and stuff at the time. I had renders, I had shaded, I had all that expensive stuff you get in CG. I was getting all that in real time. And I was using my MacBook Pro laptop at the time. No one does that because I wasn't a PC guy at the time. And people are like, this is like insane. It looks like an animated film, or at least the first pass of an animated film, or a game cinematic. So it got me thinking, like, why don't I make movies this way? So with the profits I had made from the Beyond, the first film, I decided to make an animated film. Epic came on board, gave it a little bit of funding via the Epic Mega Grants, which is an amazing program. And then from there, we made that movie, and it came out as Max Beyond. Yes, I have a thing about the word beyond, Haley. I know, I'm working on it. Uh, but that came out last year. It was on Sky Movies and Apple. And then from there, I just fell in love with the idea of taking technology real time and all of my education I had learned in filmmaking and visual effects and everything, and put that together to kind of create my own career in making content. And that's where I am today.
Wow. I mean, I'm tired just listening to all of that. It's amazing, everything that you've done in a relatively short space of time as well. Um, so I'm thinking with your career, I'm thinking about the transition from VFX soup
Yeah.
in particular to production side,
Yeah.
being a producer. Am I right in thinking that's quite a unique path in
It kind of,
VFX
it,
to
you
go
know,
that way?
yeah.
Um, I was
Yeah.
just wondering, with today's climate and a lot of people right now thinking about how they transition into other areas of VFX or the wider industry, how did you go about that specifically with your roles from VFX soup to VFX producer to director and then EP? Like, how did it all come about? Was it quite organic or did you have a plan?
The funny thing is, actually, my plan was that I wanted to make movies. I think that was the extent of my plan. But I think it became organic because, like, being a VFX supervisor, you spend a lot of time on film sets, and especially the film sets I was on big TV film sets as well as indie film sets as well as big movies. Hadn't been head of visual effects at Prime Focus in London, so I already knew how the cadence of talking to a first AD on set would be. I understood the cadence of making your days. I also understood the politics involved when you're in the edit room, the studio executives, and what that's involved. So I already had that in mind. Being an EP, one of the big reasons why Disney were really keen on making me an EP, not just because I did the pilot, was because being an EP, from my background, visual effects, and you're working on a show that has a lot of visual effects. We had a full CG car, right? A talking car. So, you kind of need an EP that was like, yeah, there's a smart way we can shoot this that is economical yet still look good and done within a television schedule. Because the thing about the difference between film and TV at the time when I was working is the TV schedule was like this tiny. You didn't have any R&D time, whereas in film you do. So the transition for that meant that I was used to working with visual effects budgets. It also meant that I had a language that I can speak directly to the visual effects house and get it instantly. So like for example, on the Disney show, there was a company called Atmosphere Effects in Vancouver, and the owner VFX suit there on the show was a guy called Andrew. And I remember him telling me, like, oh my God, it's so refreshing to be able to speak to a director that understands visual effects. Like, I don't use the words fix it in post. I do not use those words because
Yeah.
I was that roto artist cutting stuff out because someone said fix it in post on a production. So that helped massively. That became an organic process. It also meant that I knew when to use blue screen, green screen, or when just to shoot it as it is, knowing I can get a good key because we're shooting against a white sky and there's a luma key we can do, right? Like, because sometimes putting on a blue screen or a green screen is more work than actually just shooting it raw. So having that understanding from a VFX artist to VFX soup, but also understanding how much it costs as well as a VFX producer, played a massive role into my transition to becoming a film director and a producer.
Mm. And so it doesn't sound like there are many surprises, but were there anything apart from being thrown straight into creating a pilot? Were there any surprises from with your director hat on that you saw compared to being on the VFX side?
Oh yeah, yeah, there was definitely. I mean, in VFX you get notes, right? But when you're a director, you get notes, and you get tons of notes, and the job becomes very much not about framing the shot making it look good because that's expected, and you have a wonderful team around you. You have your cinematographer to work with, you have your visual effects team, and so on. Your job as a director that I very quickly had to learn on the spot. And it took a few years afterwards to really get my head around it. Was your job isn't really just about having the vision. Your job is to kind of like lead this team to that North Star that you've pitched your heart out very early on, saying this is what the movie's going to be, this is what the show's going to be, and then your job is to lead all those departments, which meant that my communication skills had to be elevated like 100 times more than what I would usually do in visual effects. Meaning, when I work with actors, there's a certain cadence and communication you work with actors as opposed to working with visual effects artists or your cinematographer, your first AD, or even the studio producers. So with the studio producer, when they ask, how's it going? They don't really want to know, like, it's looking amazing. They want to know, are we on time and are we on budget? That's what they're really asking for. Whereas when the cinematographer is saying, hey, like, how's it going? Is like, are you happy the way things are framed? Do you want us to look at a different lens? Can you go through your shot list with me? And there's the other thing, creating shot lists. That was the thing that I had to quickly get into because when you're a VFX suit, that shot list is provided to you, right? And you do your breakdown. Whereas when you're a director, the shot list is like, what is the shot? Do we start off a wide? If it's a conversation, do we just start off a wide? Do we have two over the shoulders? What lens we're using? Is there a camera move? What is the point of putting a camera move? You start having those conversations. And then when you talk to production designers, you got to explain to them like why you want this production, this art department to build this particular house and how are you going to shoot in that house and why are you shooting in that house? So you become the person that have all the answers. And when you work in actors, the actors don't want to know about the technicalities. I mean, some of the actors are very interested in visual effects, especially like when we're working with the kids on Fast Lane. They're like, what is all this green stuff? And what are these red crosses everywhere? And why is this guy running around with a gray ball and he's got a silver chrome ball? What's that about? And they're fascinated by that. But most of the time, the actors, there's two types of actors. There's actors that want to be given freedom to be expressive, be able to improvise. And I love those actors. Like when I worked with Katie Sackhoff, she was all about that. Where there are other actors like, just tell me exactly what I need to do and say, and I'll give you the best performance. So you have to direct them very differently. So I think the thing that I learned that as a director, as opposed to being a VFX soup in terms of a skill set was psychology. I'm going to say it. Directing is all about psychology. It's about getting people to do something that you want them to do and finding a way to get them to do it. And that's in all departments as well. Convincing Disney to give me a Russian arm because I watched the Michael Bay movies. I think car chase should be Russian arm. And I've got to find a way. And for them to say, okay, you can get a Russian arm for like one day, but you got to shoot all of the second unit stuff. So you got to make that work. So I think like for me, like the VFX side of things, if I didn't have that background, I don't think I would have got into film making as quick as I did. So I guess a VFX was my film school.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds really fun and interesting. Do you think, side question, do you think that directors should have some sort of VFX exposure before they start filmmaking as part of their learning?
I think so. I think so. I tell you why, because every director knows, most directors know how to pick up a camera and shoot. Now, they're not cinematographers, but they know, when they do this with their hands, right? They're framing a shot. Now, if you think about the decades of filmmaking that we've had, every single film have had some form of visual effects, whether it's a big space scene or whether it's simple paint touches, right? It's all visual effects. And I feel like if a director has an understanding of how to utilize visual effect as a tool, not as a saving grace, because the story and script will always be the king. But if they understand it like a tool, like you have with your art department, your cinematographer, then you make smarter choices in how you pull off your movie, and you probably won't go over budget that way.
Yeah. Yes. Very useful. So coming back to your career today, your longest role so far has been at Hazmation,
Yeah.
which you co-founded
Yeah.
8 years ago.
Oh yeah.
You recently announced that you're stepping away from that,
Yes.
wrapping up some projects now. But before we move on to what you're doing now,
Yeah.
can you just give us an overview of anything that you sort of that stood out to you in that time as a sort of personal and professional achievement that you'll take with you as
Oh,
you want.
100%. Like, I mean, like I owe a lot of that to my former business partner, Paula Crickard. Like, going into business with her was an amazing learning experience for me, mainly because, like, I'm what you call the artiste, right? So there's a lot of business things like, paperwork, more paperwork, more paperwork. But also, like, running a business is a serious big deal, especially when you start hiring people and you start having, you know, staff on your team, and you are responsible for their livelihoods in a way, right? Because, like, you promise them, hey, come to this company, there's a bunch of projects, and then you have to make sure that you fulfill that, not just for you and the company, but for them as well. And so that I learned a lot about that. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway is building a team under a roof on a project, and then keeping that team and trying to bring them onto other projects. And that's a skill that I learned massively, but also from a business point of view as well. Cash flows, tax credits, incentives, all of that stuff that we don't think about, like when you're creating, because you have a producer that deals with that. And now when you're running a business, you have to think about those things. I mean, I wasn't so much day to day on applying for the incentives. That's what Paula would do. But I was across it. I understood like how much work is involved, and boy, it's a lot of work. So definitely that. And I think the other takeaway is that you know, we started to see a shift in the industry massively. Like when we both set up the company originally back in 2016, 17, it was to make independent movies, specifically live action films, right? Because that's why we both met on live action. And her background's all live action. And then we very quickly see a shift in the market where animation was taken off. So we're like, oh, we should pivot to animation while still using live action approaches to making animation. But then you realize, well, animation costs a shit ton of money. We're talking a lot of money to make animated films, and we're trying to make an animated film on a condensed budget. So that has its challenges as well. So there's a lot of things you learn about that, like things like expectation. Like you're making an animated film, what are the expectations of that? What are the achievable goals you can deliver because you're using money from other people to make the film now. This is not like me making my own movie with my own money. This is like people are funding stuff, right? Getting to work with people like the BBC and Fremantle have been amazing. So there's loads of takeaways from that I've learned. But definitely, one thing I have noticed over the years or so is the fact that the market is shifting in terms of film and filmmaking. Hollywood is in a weird flux of a state at the moment. Like what does the word indie mean anymore? Because I've seen indie films which cost like 10 million plus. Is that an indie film? I don't know. Yeah, that used to be medium sized budgets. So, with that in mind, like that's what made a lot of decisions for me to like really assess what is it. I mean, look, I'm 46 years old, Haley. There's only a finite amount of work life you have. So you gotta pick something that you want to do. And if you're gonna I only have one last time to take a risk, by the way, in my head. You do it now.
No, you got, oh my goodness. No, I didn't. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. But yeah, it sounds like you've had that first sort of front row seat
Yeah,
to what's happening in the industry,
100%.
which must be super exciting to see all of the ideas that were coming through as well,
Yeah,
all of these
yeah.
IPs. So moving on to your new venture, I mean, it's been going for a little while, but you're going to be focusing on it full
Yes,
time now, I
yes,
gather.
yes.
Beyond the Pixels,
Beyond the
I was
pixels.
watching quite a few of your videos yesterday. Um, I think we're both from roughly the same era, and it did remind me of How To. I don't know why. You know that
Oh yeah,
that children's program? It's like
yeah,
How
yeah,
To, and they would explain lots of things about
yeah.
science and all of these new technologies that were coming out, and it was super, yeah, just engaging. And I think
Yeah.
you, as a person, are quite engaging as well. Your just natural energy comes through. But I learned a lot from
Oh,
the few videos that I watched yesterday, and I like that they're quite short as well. So
yeah,
between 2 and 4 or 5 minutes, so
yeah.
little snapshots into what's happening, and largely focused on innovation as well,
Yes.
which I feel that you really find a buzz off of that. You have videos ranging from, I'm guessing, some old courses on VFX
Yeah,
production to new tech. I saw one on a new AI ring to monitor your health,
yeah.
to gaming. Full disclosure, I'm not a gamer. So I can't nerd out with you, I'm afraid.
That's
I,
okay.
I did have a Game Boy,
That's
so I can
good.
claim
That's good enough.
that. But tell us a bit about the mission with Beyond the
Yeah.
Pixels.
I mean, you kind of hit the nail there with innovation. So one of the things that I noticed, like, so when I had that moment when I was at Hazamation and we're making movies, and I'm like, what is it I really, really want to do? What is it I love doing? And it was also my business partner Paula actually challenged me to think about that as well, which was amazing. And I was like, well, I got into the world of Unreal because I was ballsy enough to try to innovate, to try find new ways to keep doing what I'm doing, which is telling stories, but in different ways that empowers me as an artist without having to go through the usual traditional routes. So things like real-time technology blew my mind, but also the way we use virtual production and cameras and shooting stuff on an iPhone combined. I love all that buzz, and I started to build a lot of affiliations in terms of like with technology companies over the decade or so. I started off working closely with Adobe when I made my short films. And so you look at all of my short films and even my feature films, if you look at the end roller credits, there's a lot of technology sponsors, and there's a reason for that. And the technology sponsors don't usually give money. A lot of it is giving technology, and I got a buzz out of that. Like for example, are you familiar with Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve?
Yes.
Right. So when you load up DaVinci Resolve, you get the splash screen, right? Now, if you load it a few times, the splash screen changes. One of the splash screen is a robot woman in sort of like a blue kind of tone. That's from my first feature film, The Beyond. And the reason for that is because I was the first independent filmmaker to make an entire movie using Blackmagic cameras, edit the entire Resolve 12, and deliver it at Resolve. So to be in the forefront of that, I'm always super excited about it. I get a buzz out of it. Always the riskiest as well, because if you balls up, no one's ever going to use that technology, so you got to make sure to do it right. But it's the same with Unreal. I was one of the first to make one of the first animated feature films entirely final pixels, i.e., no compositing, no visual effects. Everything was in, I want to say in camera, in game, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of the first. And again, it comes with its pros and cons. So I get a buzz at that, and I start to realize, well, the way the industry is going, the traditional way of creating content no longer applies. And what I mean by traditional way is like you go to a sales company, you go to a distribution company, go to a financier, you pitch them your script, your pitch deck, and then they put you along 100 other filmmakers, and then they pick one, and you go through the whole process. Like, it was too boring for me. I'm like, I really believe that we're at a time at the moment where artists are given tools to create content, and it's up to you to tell that story. No one cares what the tech you use, but the tech does get you to a certain point. So, with all of that network of connections I've built over the decades and my love for storytelling, and I had recently finished a video game cinematic called Dune Awakening, so in the movie Dune. So for 3 years, I was the cinematics director on that, and again, that's a AAA game, and that was with a company called Funcom. And I learned a lot working on that. Obviously, I've got to be careful how much I say about Dune Awakening, so all the NDAs I got on me. But one thing I did learn was that they're taking a big, massive universe and making it work in a game. And why it works so well in a game is that it's very different to a movie. A movie is very passive, right? Which is amazing. But at the same time, there's something about video games where you combine story and immersion. You get that same cinematic. I mean, if you look at some of the video games, Haley, like Last of Us or Call of Duty, the cinematic bar is on,
It's scary.
right? It's like, and you've got big name actors in there and stuff, and all of a sudden you're like, well, it's no longer that cinema is one thing and games is one thing. Like when I started in the industry back in the day, like I told you, right, when I went to work at MPC, I had to start at the bottom because back then the film industry was like, we make movies, you make games for kids. Whereas now it's kind of the roles are reversed a bit. So with all of that in mind, I wanted to create a YouTube channel last year. It was just a YouTube channel, by the way, in September, just to share my ideas, like play some of my favorite games and explain why those games inspire me as a creative. They were not reviews, they were not coverage. It was all about just what inspired. It was a what inspired me YouTube channel, right? It clocked up to close to like 40, 50,000 subs, and it was since September. And all of a sudden, like I'm getting calls from brands like Sony and AMD and Razer. They're like, hey, we love your YouTube channel, but also you're an influencer, but not an influencer, to the point where you influence people to look at the products, but you're really talking from a personal perspective. You take the products and you put it in an actual project, as opposed to doing a demo. And that's a big deal because people can see an actual project and then in a month's time they can play it like the Fortnite game. So with Razer, I did a lot of stuff with Razer. And then all the games that you see being developed on the Razer videos, you can go and play them in Fortnite. So people have something to follow. So it becomes more genuine. So I'm like, well, this is a really great way of tapping into the stuff that I love, stuff that I'm doing already. I can make a business out of it and still stay true to my core ethos, which is tell great stories. But most
Mm.
importantly, today, it's not just about telling great stories, it's reaching your audience. And the
Yeah.
hardest thing about making a movie, Hayley, is you put your heart and soul in making a great movie, and then no one sees it because there wasn't enough marketing budget put behind it. There's no there's no kind of audience activation, as they call it. All of that stuff matters. In fact, you can make the most amazing movie, no one sees it, no one cares, right? And I'm going back to my first feature, The Beyond. It was seen by nearly everyone because there was a lot of marketing put into it, but no marketing budget, by the way. I'm going to tell you that now. It was
Oh,
literally me, Cinefx, 3D World, you know, even Ian Fales from, before and afters, he did some coverage on it. I reached out to everyone. So all of a sudden, I'm like, well, this grassroots marketing today is even more relevant because you have LinkedIn, social media, but also you have Fortnite. You can create a Fortnite experience of your movie, and that can be promoted. You have Roblox. All of those things are free to download and use, and you can monetize from that as well. So all of a sudden, I'm like, there's a paradigm shift on how we not necessarily make content, but more like how we distribute content. And that's what Beyond the Pixels is about. Beyond the Pixels is basically the intersection of storytelling, technology, and gaming to create the next generation of content for the next generation of audiences, essentially.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, it's a really good channel. So
Well,
anyone
thank
watching,
you.
go over. I'll put a link to it here, and
Awesome.
you can go and watch us after we've finished our interview. Don't go anywhere yet, please. So I mean, I think I learned about Unreal from you because I feel like
Mm.
you've been using it since day one. And like you were saying, with all this tech and software that's out there now, and you mentioned Hollywood kind of maybe reassessing where
Yeah.
things are going. Do you think that that's been part of, because I've got to bring it back to VFX,
Yeah.
part of this overall state of flux that we're in right now that's affecting our industry as well as other industries? But do
Yeah.
you think Hollywood and other studios around the world are just kind of looking into what's happening? Because it feels like everything's evolving really quickly right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's these two letters that's been thrown around quite a lot, which is
Yeah, I'm
AI.
trying not to say
We gotta
it.
say it, Haley. We gotta address the elephant in the room here. I mean, for sure, AI is a big part of on what Hollywood's. I mean, I'm not saying that's why visual effects houses are shutting down. No, there's a whole political thing going on in that landscape, which to do with budgets and studios wanting to get stuff for like cheaper, but still the quality benchmark has to be high, and the schedules are compressing even more because we're in a world now where there's a lot of streaming. Like back in the day, man, when I was growing up, I only had like BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4. That's all I had, and
Yeah,
the cinema and theater, right? Now you got so much streaming platforms out there. MGM have got their own. Well, now it's part of Amazon, but you have Paramount Plus. You have tons, right? On top of the Netflix, and so they all need content, and they need content fast, but also the quality of the content has to be super, super, super high. And if you look at YouTube, YouTube is exactly the same thing. YouTube is becoming now like one of the most spent platform on television devices, not just your phone. So then content for that becomes quite aggressive. So a lot of these studios go, well, I just saw this YouTube documentary, which looks freaking good. Why are we spending millions to make our documentary on our platform when on YouTube that looks just as good and probably made for like way cheaper? But then they go back to the visual effects house and go, well, they've done that. Why can't you do that? And there's a whole thing that they don't understand. There's infrastructure in visual effects. There's mouths to feed. There are people's day rates, and there's the economy and inflation. All of that stuff comes into what builds a company. And but at the end of the day, the studio execs are like, well, my mandate is to make it cheaper and good, so we'll go somewhere else. So that's a big problem, and that problem's been there for a while, but it's just getting more and more. And then you throw in AI into the mix. And they're like, well, Lionsgate has just invested tons in with OpenAI or no Runway to kind of like create their own data set where they can then generate second unit images or second unit footage very quickly without going to shoots. That's great. And they're like, cool. So the savings they make, they don't need a second unit team anymore. They don't need filmmaking to go out and shoot all that stuff. They can just go into their library and make stuff. So as impressive as that is, that also has a knock-on effect. So it's now not only are these financiers and studio executives are harnessing AI, because look, let's face it, if you speak to anyone that runs a business, if there's a way to save money, they're going to look into it regardless, right? Yes, there's the ethics. Yes, there's the morals. But that's from us artists. That isn't coming from the business sense, the people that run the business. So I get this all the time. Everyone keeps asking me, like, what do you think of AI? Like, what do you think it's going to be? I can tell you that the AI tech is going to get better and better and better. I mean, I'm not even talking months here. Like every week there's a new update and it's getting better. I don't think we have to worry or try to push AI as a technology. I think what we need to be pushing is the ethic behind AI. How do we change the legislation? Because the amount of effort being put in the technological advancement is should be the same amount we're putting into how do we make this work from an ethical point of view so that every artist is happy using AI. Because at the moment it's a little bit like, well, no one is suing us. I guess we continue. Do you know what I mean? So and that's where again what I'm doing with Beyond the Pixels is like I will be looking at AI, but I'm going to be looking at AI from a creative standpoint of view, and I'm going to put a massive disclaimer saying this is not for commercial use. This hopefully will inspire people to see the power of AI and think about the ethical things. How can we put in some kind of framework? Now I know there's studios that there's agents at CAA, UTA, all these agents out there are putting legal frameworks in place in order to protect their actors or their talent, as they call them, right? And that's good. That's great. But there's a bit more than that. What about artists that create an image? Say some like starving artist somewhere around the world create this beautiful art piece. He or she's trying to make a living off that, and all of a sudden it gets scraped. How do you protect people from that? Right. And now, obviously, there are options in a lot of these platforms, like even YouTube. Like if your content's got any form of AI, tick that box. That's a good start, but that isn't the solution. So that's one of my big things that I really want to use this platform to help at least play a small part in finding that solution. And I think, it's really interesting, Haley, because we're in a point now where everyone's very vocal. Like, back in like the mid 90s, we didn't have these platforms to be vocal. Like when Napster was around, like making songs available illegally, everyone was like, yeah, let's just Napster download. And obviously now it's like it's something else. But I feel like we have there's a lot of platforms to voice our opinions that people that make decisions will see those voices. And I feel like if anyone's going to change the way we use AI, I think it's going to be the people, hopefully, and not just the commercial executives.
Yeah, and the music reference
Yeah.
is a good one because I must admit I had some CDs back in the day that may or may not have been downloaded illegally. But
We're all there, man. We're all there.
but I've been using Spotify since it came out. I've been paying for
Same.
Spotify, obviously. So yeah, maybe it's really interesting to look at different industries and how they've evolved with these mega changes in technology. Yeah, I'll keep my eyes open for those videos then, as will most people, I'm sure, in our industry. So again, coming back to your career,
Yes.
with hindsight or just
Mhm.
kind of thinking about what you've done over the years, is there anything that you would have liked to have done differently or wish you'd have known at specific times in your career?
Yeah, I guess the older you get, the more wiser you get, right? So like I remember when I started off, I was I am one old, but still. I think I think this is more of a personal thing as opposed to more of a technological thing. But for me, like I think I wished I listened more. I think when you're young and you're breaking in, you're like, we're gonna do this, gonna go, 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 go. I never stood back and thought, let's take a breather. Now, I don't know if that would have affected my trajectory, but I feel like today I spend more time listening to people and really taking the time to process things before reacting. I used to be very reactive back in the day, and over the decades working in the industry, you start to work with different types of people, which is why I always tell people to freelance as much as you can. Like I know I think these days you don't really have much of a choice but the freelance. But like a lot of people back in the day were like, "Oh, I'm gonna get a full-time job. I'm gonna stay in this company. I'm gonna stay and it's secure and stuff." Whereas like if I never freelance, I don't think I would have able to feed up different types of energy or people learn from other people. Like there's some amazing producers I've worked with. I'm like, wow, like I love the way you handled that put out the fire situation as opposed to screaming, or I like the way you dealt with the way this legal issue happened because I would have been freaking out, that kind of thing. And or you work with a specific artist and you talk to he or she about their process, like, wow, I never thought about breaking down a shot that way. So I think in hindsight, if I was less go 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 and more like take a breather, I think I would have been less stressful.
Yeah.
So stress is a big thing. Yeah.
Yes, especially back in the VFX days, I'm sure.
Oh
Tight,
yeah.
tight deadlines. We kind of touched on this question already, but just in case you wanted to add anything else, give us any pearls of wisdom. Our industry is obviously taking some hits, as are
Yeah.
other industries, like gaming and technology in general. For VFX, given your expertise, do you have any predictions about how things are going to go? Or a lot of people are really calling for change as well,
Yeah.
and it's kind of thinking, well, who does that fall to? Is it the big studios? Is it politicians when we're talking about tax rebates? Do you have any insights on that at all
I
from your?
think I think you touched on pretty much all of that. I mean, tax rebates is a big thing. In fact, tax rebates is probably the reason why a lot of visual effects houses were set up in Canada, right? Canada was like the tax haven for visual effects work to be done. Like even the show that I did, the Fast Lane show for Disney, that was all shot in Vancouver and visual effects done in Vancouver. We could have, and it wasn't set in Vancouver. It was supposed to be set in America anyway, so it
Yeah.
doubled up, and that's because of the tax incentives. So I think that plays a big part. But also, I think like honestly, there's a lot of workflows in place in a lot of the big studios that are legacy based, and a lot of
Mm,
them don't want to change. Right? They don't want to put in real time because they're like, well, we're so used to Maya, we're so used to Arnold rendering, and that's okay. But you know, if a financier and most of these financiers are getting smarter now. They read a lot, right? They read Ian Fell's before and afters because that's what they should be doing. Just a little plug there for my buddy. But like they are very smart about this stuff, and they're like, well, hang on a sec. Like I'm hearing about Unreal Engine. Why are we not looking at Unreal Engine? Surely there's a massive saving there. And the challenge becomes that an old school legacy visual effects house that have made their money for decades or their business for decades by by utilizing proprietary technology and tools and workflow are no longer relevant because like, well, we've heard about real time. Why are you taking like 4 months to generate this sequence with lots of render passes and compositing and all of this keyframe animation where we could use motion capture? Oh, why does motion capture cost so expensive? Why don't we use something called Move AI or markerless mocap? We don't need to fly people to expensive studios. We can just shoot them anywhere. All of these things are going to play a big part in how the visual effects industry is going to move going forward. And I'm not going to lie, AI is going to play a big part of it. Now, when I say AI, I don't mean generative AI specifically. I'm looking at things, I'm thinking about machine learning,
mm,
like what the Foundry do with the auto rotoscoping, where it analyzes the pixels and it auto roto. I mean, I have to admit, Haley, when Foundry showed that to me last year, I had a tear in my eye. I just thought way back of like when I was a roto artist, cutting out all those frames, and now like I could have just pressed that button. I could have focused on compositing, not cutting out that friggin' hair. So so that's a good thing. That's a good thing because it means that you speed up menial tasks, allowing the artist to be artists and be creative, right?
yeah.
Same with tracking technology as well.
Can I ask you though? Sorry to cut in,
Yeah.
but do you think it will prevent a lot of people getting that first role, or will they just move into different kinds of roles? Because a lot
Yeah.
of people started out in roto.
Yeah, and I think I think that entry role is going to change. It's no longer going to be like doing the menial task anymore. Like I have to admit, like I'm glad I did Roto because I know the pain involved in doing Roto, which means that my decisions when I was a VFX supervisor took me back to me being at the NPC basement rotoscoping, right? So, but I think today, if you look at the generation of people coming out of uni today, they're very, very tech savvy. I'm reading about 24-year-olds raising millions of dollars of seed funding for their new AI tech company, right? A few years ago it was Web3, it was NFTs, right? And a lot of those are young people now are much more savvy and much more entrepreneurial, where they're like, well, I don't need to go work as an assistant on like next to nothing wages. I'm just going like set up my own thing and raise seed funding. And I'm making content or products or technology for people of my age. What better person to know about this than someone at my age? This is why if you look at Roblox, a lot of the or even Fortnite, a lot of the content that does really, really well on Fortnite and Roblox are not necessarily the good looking ones because they don't have the experience to make something look good and cinematic, right? But they do know what fun is. And they also do know what rocks someone like a 17-year-old boat, right? So if you look at that, there's a game on Fortnite called Only Up. So simple. It's like a bunch of cubes and people just jumping up and going up, and then whoever gets there to the top wins. It's not going to win best graphics of the year, but it got millions and millions of views. Now, if you convert that millions of views to the Fortnite economy, which you can make money on Fortnite, by the way, that equals a lot of money. So when I was at the Epic Unreal Engine Fest last year or the year before. I was giving a talk there, and I got to hang out with some of the Fortnite OGs. They call themselves the Fortnite OGs. They started off when they were like 13 and 14-year-olds. Obviously, they couldn't make any money until they were 18, so their parents kept the money until gave it to them. But they were all like making fantastic living. They were driving freaking amazing cars. So that goes back to my point about what you asked, the entry level jobs. So now that when people are coming out of uni or the young generations are coming out, and I have niece and nephews that ask me the same question, they're like, but why would we go and be a runner? Why would we do that when we could just do that? And that's where we're at today, Haley.
Certainly interesting times. I know we're running out of time.
That's
Do we
okay.
have time for two quick
Of
questions?
course, yes, sure.
Okay, so my next question, just bringing it back to some more fun stuff, but what are you most excited about that's out there or coming out in the near future, innovation wise?
I think the thing that I'm really excited about is probably the future of YouTube. I'm really, really impressed with that because YouTube isn't this thing now where people are just putting a bunch of videos. It's almost like becoming like if you create content, seriously create content for YouTube, you're a producer. You're making your own show. You're a network executive producer now. You're a network show. You have your own channel. That's really exciting. And some of the new tools that YouTube are putting into place at the moment, like, for like metrics and new ways of monetizing and how you control Google ads and stuff like that. I'm really excited at that because like I can see a future where like if you want your content out there, you can bypass all of those traditional gatekeepers and go directly to the consumers. Now, of course, it's not as easy as putting your video up there and you consumers see it. There's a lot of work that goes behind it, but the difference is you're not relying on that middle person. The other thing is also, I'm actually really excited about AI. I'm excited about AI because of the technological empowerment it gives an artist. I'm also excited that people are looking into ways of making it ethical. So I'm very excited about that. So I'm not scared of AI. I'm not fearful of AI to go, oh my God, it's going to ruin us. I'm excited that everyone's using it and in fact to the point where we've got no choice but to make sure it's done right because everyone's using it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing also I'm excited about is UGC, user generated content. I've already touched on that I love doing a lot of content with Fortnite, but like, one of the first projects we're doing at Beyond the Pixels is a Walking Dead universe Fortnite. So what Fortnite do is they release these seasons, and the season this at the moment is called Walking Dead, where they team up with Walking Dead, the people that make Walking Dead, and they release a bunch of assets. So you have all the zombies, you have the environments, and you can create your own content around the world of Walking Dead universe, providing you adhere to the brand guidelines, i.e., you can't take Ninja Turtles and put it into Walking Dead because that's a big no-no on brand guidelines, and you don't do anything derogatory and that kind of thing. But it means that you can then create content that people will want to watch because everyone's familiar with Walking Dead. Same for Ninja Turtles. And I'm really excited at what other content they're going to bring out there in terms of like there could be a Star Wars one. Pretty sure there will be because obviously Disney's involvement with Epic is quite big. But it means now creators can play in the world of other brands. Whereas 10 years ago, or well, maybe a few years ago, like if you wanted to work in the Star Wars universe, you either need to have access to the world of Star Wars as a creative, as an executive, or you're just like, oh, I wish I did that, or you go and do fan videos which get taken down today. So I feel like I'm very excited that creators like myself and other people can play in that world and put their own spin to content, and it's legal and you can monetize off it as well. That's very exciting. Yeah.
Interesting. You'll have to do a video on that because
Oh,
that's
coming up, coming up.
okay. Last question to finish up. I saw from your LinkedIn, because you've included all of your mentoring and speaking at events. You're involved in a lot of events, clearly. Where can people meet you in person this year?
Yeah, the bummer is I was supposed to be at FMX this year. I was so close, but because of the current movie I'm on, the schedule just didn't align.
Oh,
But I am going to be announcing a bunch more that I'm currently trying to like lock down. So I'll just tell people just follow me on LinkedIn. I post which events I'm on, and I'm always inviting people that if you see me, just come and say hi. Absolutely, come and say hi. I am going to be at actually I'm going to be at one of the One Voice event, which is an event about voice acting in video games, and there's a panel where I'm going to be talking from a cinematics director. There'll be other actors on there, and voice acting is amazing because like some of the biggest games like Baldur's Gate, Call of Duty have some of the most Last of Us have some of the most amazing voice actors, and I feel like it's it's their moment to shine today because like if you look at like some of the TV shows like The Last of Us, they even features some of the voice actors. And yeah, even fun fact, that show Mythic Quest on Apple?
no.
Okay, there's a show that it's a really cool show. It's called Mythic Quest, and one of the female characters in there does the voices for Zero Dawn Horizon, which is a big, really cool game. So on the PlayStation. So I think it's a good time. So I'm going to be speaking at that event, and it's on my LinkedIn. But yeah, definitely just yeah, just reach out. My LinkedIn links will be on this, I'm sure. So yeah,
Yeah, amazing. Well, I'll probably bump into you at some point around London.
I'm sure
Um,
you will.
well, I really, really enjoyed our talk today. I know that we ran over
Likewise.
quite a bit,
That's
but
okay.
there's just so much to talk about.
So much.
But yeah, thank you again, Haz. I really appreciate your
My
time today.
pleasure. My
Thanks
pleasure.
everyone for watching.
Bye.